It's crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, which means it's time for Locked On Steelers to talk with Locked On Jets. Chris Carter with John Kutchko. We're going to go over this matchup and how the Steelers are facing Davante Adams for a second week in a row, kind of, because he didn't play last week. We'll talk about that addition to Aaron Rodgers, what the Steelers quarterback situation looks like, who has the better pass rush, and all the matchups here on crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with my friend and co-host, John Kutchko. We are here from Locked On Steelers and Locked On Jets, breaking down this upcoming Sunday night matchup at Acrisure Stadium where the Steelers take on the Jets. And as always, Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you can win $50 instantly when you play $5 at Prize Picks. All right, John Kutchko's back here with us here. It's been 2 years. It's funny. We felt like we did a show last year. We were like, no, we didn't. It's been since 2022. But it's crazy to think because that was the game where Kenny Pickett took the reins from the Steelers at quarterback position. And now this time around, it looks like it's going to be Russell Wilson taking the reins at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I would love to go back 2 years to the last time we did this. Can you imagine, like, at that point, Steelers breaking in Kenny Pickett. Literally the last time it felt like Zach Wilson had a shot to be the franchise quarterback for the Jets because he led a big comeback. Can you imagine, like, telling the versions of ourselves 2 years ago, the next time these teams play, the quarterback matchup will be Russell Wilson versus Aaron Rodgers.
That'd be that. I would have said, go home, you're drunk, if you had told me that. It was a pretty crazy situation. But John, let's talk about what Aaron Rodgers had been setting up for the Jets. It has to have been a whirlwind week and a half or so for you. You got international football games. You got the head coach being fired. You have a top playmaking wide receiver reunited with the quarterback that the Jets signed in Davante Adams. How are you even sleeping right now? Because I would just be frustrated about all the shows I have to redo.
Yeah, I was just thinking yesterday, pretty much it was wall to wall. I was doing shows because of like all the moves the Jets made. Let me see if I get everything right. Since last Tuesday, let's go back to 2 weeks ago Sunday. Jets lose in London to the Vikings. They fire their head coach. 2 days later, they demote their play caller. They then lose to the Buffalo Bills on Monday night. They give Hassan Reddick, who still hasn't played for them yet after they traded for him in the spring, they gave him permission to seek a trade. Reddick had been dropped by his agents days before that. Reddick hired Drew Rosenhaus, and now the Jets have traded for Davante Adams. That's what's happened in New York the last 2 weeks.
That is insane. I completely forgot about the whole Hassan Reddick situation, even, which is just. That's just so bizarre and wild.
A star pass rusher holding out. It's not in the top 5 news stories for the Jets the last 2 weeks.
That's how crazy it's been for y'all. Like that's nuts. But I want to talk about the combination that the Jets are going to lean on here. And because let's be clear, the Jets are 2-4. They haven't come bursting out of the gate with Aaron Rodgers actually healthy this year. And they went to get Davante Adams to get some help. Now, John, it appears to me the Jets are basically saying it's all in, it's now or never, got to make it happen this year. How have you felt about how Aaron Rodgers has fit in with the Jets and whether or not adding a Davante Adams could be the game changer thing that unlocks everything?
Chris, I have to be honest with you. I think it's been disappointing so far. Now, I do think Rodgers played very well Monday night against the Buffalo Bills, except for he threw a late interception, which he kind of blamed on Mike Williams. I watched that play like 8 times. I mean, I think like Mike Williams ran a bad route, but that was mostly on Rodgers. After the game, Rodgers went out and criticized Williams in his post-game press conference. Then, like hours later, the Jets trade for his favorite receiver. Now, I'm not saying these things are necessarily, cause and effect, but
why is that?
Right? You look at it and you're kind of saying, I think that Rodgers has looked 40 a lot for much of this season. There have been some really some standout moments. He had a great Week 3 game Thursday night against the New England Patriots. He did look good against the Buffalo Bills, but there have also been games where he hasn't looked good. He was very shaky in the 2 games that preceded the Buffalo game. He did not play well against Denver And then he did not play well in London against Minnesota. He threw 3 interceptions in that game. The thing that really stands out with Rodgers is that he's nowhere near as mobile as he used to be. He can still be a little slippery. He can still evade some pass rushers. He can move left and right. But you see, he's having trouble like even getting away from 300-pound linemen when he's flushed from the pocket. And one of the things about Aaron Rodgers that was always special that I always felt like set him apart was his ability to move left and right and break the pocket and throw a strike while on the run 20 yards down the field with pinpoint accuracy. The arm's still pretty good. He's still as smart as he's ever been, reading defenses pre-snap and post-snap. But this is not the same guy. And the other thing that I think is a big concern, and this is more of a longer-term thing than anything this week, and he's been open about it. He's 40 years old. The body does not recover from hits the way it used to. And he's been banged up. He's taken some big hits, and there have been a couple points over the last 3 weeks where after he took a big hit, you wonder, is he going to have to leave the game? Now, he's bounced back and gotten back on the field every time, but over the course of the long season, these hits are going to pile up. It's not going to be easier to recover from them as we get into November, December. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. He's not a guy who's completely washed up, but I don't think he's been the quarterback the Jets hoped that they were getting. I think the Jets won't say this, but I think if they were being honest with you, this is not what they were hoping for.
I mean, it's tough to imagine that it is when you have the 22nd ranked scoring offense and in total yards offense. You're like 16th in passing yards. You rank 6th in passing touchdowns. But you look at everything else that you got going. The offense hasn't been galvanized yet by Aaron Rodgers. And again, you're 2-4 out the gate, and you got some catching up to do with the team that you just lost to, at home on the earlier this week. But John, I look at this matchup and I think it's funny that, like you said, if you had told me 2 years ago that these two teams would be meeting up again, it would be Aaron Rodgers versus Russell Wilson, I would have called you crazy. But here we are. I look at how these quarterbacks line up with each other, and I think a lot of this is going to come down to which older quarterback, because I do think that Russell Wilson is going to start, even though Mike Tomlin will not admit it. He will not officially come out and say it. I think he's going to waste as much time as possible until he absolutely has to make an announcement so that the Jets don't get a chance to just get a beat on one quarterback right away. I look at this matchup between these two older quarterbacks and wonder, okay, who's going to be able to protect themselves more, because both teams can get after the quarterback. Both defenses have a lot of playmakers to them. This could be a matchup to see which older quarterback has adjusted better to their new team, and how that plays out moving forward with the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think from a Jets standpoint, I could go either way, whether I want to face Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. The Jets have been hurt by quarterback scrambles a lot this year. Justin Fields is obviously a very mobile quarterback. I watched some of the game the Steelers played in Vegas last weekend, and he made some plays with his legs. And the Jets have been bad against the run anyway. But on the other hand, the Jets are banged up in the secondary right now. It sounds like their slot corner, Michael Carter II, is going to miss another game. He's been out with a back injury. And their number 2 corner, DJ Reed, got banged up in Monday Night Football against Buffalo. His status is very much up in the air. So, maybe it's better for Pittsburgh to have the veteran in there who, Justin Fields is a guy with potential, but I think, the veteran always knows where the ball needs to go. And the Jets, could have some issues in their secondary. So, I could go either way on which quarterback I prefer to face. But yeah, I think the Jets do have a few issues on the defensive side of the ball right now.
I think that's certainly a question the Steelers have to try to force them to answer in this game. You look at how the Steelers have played to start this season. Their offense hasn't been really, getting going early, but I do think that there's space for the things to work on. I did a film study for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on Justin Fields and all the different passes that were like more routine within the structure of the play type plays that he was supposed to make that he didn't make. And I think that that's something that Justin Fields has lacked in consistently throughout the year. And then if the Steelers feel like Russell Wilson can be the guy that erases that, that could be the factor that ultimately wins him the job for good.
Yeah, it's very logical, and that's the way it goes. Look, I've been covering the Jets a long time. I've watched young quarterbacks come in And it's been rough. The Jets have not put them in good situations. But one thing you appreciate with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, or even if I go back to like the days of Josh McCown and Ryan Fitzpatrick, there's a big difference having a veteran in there where they know where the ball needs to go. They know pre-snap
exactly
how the protection needs to be set, and when they read something pre-snap, they know where it needs to go, which is not always true of the younger quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that the Steelers have been just trying to get Justin Fields to that level, while Russell Wilson has recovered from his multiple injuries this year. But I don't think that they've seen enough of it, because you look at, rushing touchdowns 5, passing touchdowns 5, also 5. I think that that's where a lot of Steelers fans are excited to see the scoring and the points go up on his part, but I think there's still bigger picture questions the Steelers have to answer as far as their quarterback situation. We'll get more into that and what both defenses need to do in this game to set the tone against those quarterbacks, all here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, John Kutchko, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this episode is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on big value collector item cards like rookie cards of Patrick Mahomes, TJ Watt, and Justin Herbert just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. And Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and a clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack with game transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full rationale provided, an explanation of how your card was scored. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. And use code LockedOnNFL when you get there. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you need to download today to get all your favorite tickets to live events. When you look around, there's a lot of things happening in the fall. It's a great time to go out and check out things. In Pittsburgh, you got back-to-back home games against New York football teams. The Jets one week, the Giants another. You can get tickets there. You can get tickets to most events by just checking out the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app today. When you do, you can see several different features that can be truly helpful to you, like their super picks feature, where they find you the best seat, whether it's the front row at the concert or club seats at the big game. Plus, Game Time has the best price guarantee. That means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers here with John Kutchko of Locked On Jets. John, just revisiting the quarterback situation real quick. Like you said, you feel like the Jets have different things to worry about. I truly believe, we're recording this Wednesday late afternoon. I truly believe Mike Tomlin will take this to the 11th hour as best as he can without letting up who the starter is, while knowing internally who the starter is there. Is that something that you think could be annoying for the Jets? A lot of people are thinking like, oh, do NFL teams really care that much? Well, it doesn't exactly completely commandeer your week. It doesn't fool you, but it does force you to take on more time in your preparation to devote to that approaching either of those quarterbacks, because they're very different.
I think that like 9 times out of 10 when teams do this, it's nonsense, because at the end of the but I actually think in this case it could make a difference, because as you mentioned, these quarterbacks are so different stylistically. Justin Fields, you have a guy who's very dynamic with his legs, a lot of raw ability. Russell Wilson, of course, in Russell Wilson's prime, he was as mobile as dangerous on the run as any quarterback in the league. But as far as I can tell, it seems like he's lost a lot of that mobility. He's now more in kind of like that veteran mode where, as we mentioned in the first segment, he kind of the guy you can count on to get the ball where it needs to go. So I actually do think it could impact the Jets this week. And normally I'd be kind of like mocking the idea, because I think like a lot of the stuff NFL coaches do that's secretive really doesn't give you an advantage. It's one of those things where it's like they're trying to like make it look like they're doing something to gain an advantage. I do think this week it actually could, to an extent at least, make the Jets' life a little bit more difficult. At the end of the day, look, you got to go out there and play who you're playing. Sometimes teams have backup quarterbacks who are different in style than their starter. Like in this case, the starter goes down, the team may put their backup in and run an entirely new offense. You got to adjust. You got to go out there and play. So I don't think it's necessarily something that swings the game, but I do buy into the idea that, it could make the Jets' life a little bit more difficult as they prepare.
I think it's just that extra annoyance. I cover pit football where, hey, some Jets guys, Israel Abanikanda and Carter Warren hail from. But when I cover Pat Narduzzi, the head coach there, he makes a living off of telling you, I don't know, maybe this guy will start, maybe that guy will start. Who knows? He might be injured. He might not be injured though. And I'm just like, I hate college coaches sometimes because they can do that. But now Mike Tomlin's doing that in the NFL. It's just like, give me a break, Mike. But that's the quarterback situation. I want to talk to you about the guys that can most impact the quarterback. And that, of course, can be the pass rush on defense, getting after the quarterback, getting them off their lanes. First, let's talk about the Jets pass rush because I think they have the third most sacks in the league. What have you seen from them that's allowed them to take over like this?
So I got to be honest with you. I've been talking a lot about this on Locked On Jets. The Jets statistics, a lot of the defensive areas are very good. I don't know that the team's quite as good as the numbers would suggest. And I've been a big defender of the Jets defense the last couple of years, because there have been a lot of Jets fans. If you look 2022, 2023, their stats were really good. And there were doubters. There were people saying, "Oh, they're really that good? Is it, other offenses are playing less aggressive because the Jets couldn't move the ball in those years?" And I always said, no, the Jets defense was dominant in those years. This year, I think a lot of it, or at least some of it, has to do with the offense that they've been playing. I mean, they got Will Levis against Tennessee. They got the New England offense, which can't really do a whole lot right now. They got Bo Nix on a rainy day at MetLife Stadium where Denver couldn't really move the ball all that much. And Nix was having trouble gripping the ball. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it was a surprise when you watched Nix that day if he threw the ball within 5 yards of his intended target. They got Sam Darnold, who, look, the Jets fans know Sam Darnold well. I know he's off to an undefeated start in Minnesota, but a guy who pretty mistake prone, even playing well with the Vikings right now. When we talk about the sack total, so Will McDonald has 7 sacks. He was first round pick out of Iowa State a year ago. He had a lot of sacks where like he's been unblocked, or there was one on Levis where he was a spy and Levis kind of took off and McDonald tackled him behind the line. There was one where, this is the famous play I always talk about, where, again, I'm not exaggerating, Will Levis was like kind of like in the grasp and he decided to roll the ball on the ground. I've never seen anything like that before. Literally, like, you could look this play up. He rolled the ball on the ground and the Jets picked it up, and McDonald was credited for a strip sack there. Now, the one caveat here is, I'm not joking, like, this is like literally, I've watched Jets quarterbacks. I've seen the butt fumble. I've seen any number of ridiculous things that Jets quarterback. I saw the Hail Mary interception against Miami last year. So I've watched a lot of quarterbacks do ridiculous things. I don't think I've ever seen anything like what Will Levis did in that game. So Will McDonald's 7 sacks are not as impressive as they look, but what I would say is that Will McDonald is generating pressures at a high rate. So I do think the sacks will come. I don't think he's like best pass rusher in the NFL, as the 7 sacks in 6 games would suggest. I do think he's a productive young pass rusher. Elsewhere, though, I mean, I don't know if the Jets are getting what they're looking for. Quinton Williams, who's been an excellent defensive tackle for them, is not having a good year by any stretch of the imagination. Jets lost a lot of key players on this defense. They traded John Franklin Myers, a good defensive end, to Denver over the offseason. Bryce Huff left in free agency to Philadelphia. He was a 10-sack guy for them last year. Now, went to Philadelphia, is doing nothing, so Jets probably were right to let him go. The guy who was supposed to bridge that gap was Hassan Reddick, who hasn't shown up. So all this is the way to say that, I think the Jets aren't as impressive as they look on paper defensively.
Wow. That's interesting to hear. I want to get before I get to the Steelers defense, I want to ask you the impact of not having Salah around. Do you feel like that is being felt or is going to become more pronounced, or you think that's going to be a non-issue?
It's difficult to say because nobody really knows. The Jets have kind of been shrouded in mystery. How much did Salah run the defense, and how much did Jeff Ulbrich run the defense? And either way, it feels like the Jets are going to have to make adjustments because if Salah was really hands on with the defense, then they lost him. If Jeff Ulbrich was really hands on running the defense, well, he's now the interim head coach, so now he has more responsibility. So the first game against Buffalo was not good. How much of that was the fact that they're still sorting this new stuff out? I don't know. I think part of it's just, again, they have issues on the defensive line that the Bills exploited. And they were again dealing with injuries in the secondary. I think it's very much wait and see. I think we'll find out more as the season progresses.
I think so too. I mean, it's too small a sample size without him to know. But I just wanted to hear that from the insider. On the flip side, the Steelers have a pass rush that's pretty strong. It doesn't rank nearly as high as the Jets have right now, but it should be bolstered by Alex Highsmith, who's missed the last few games. Mike Tomlin said he was optimistic for his return, and lo and behold, Alex Highsmith was a limited practice participant on Wednesday. If he continues and gets a full practice by Thursday or Friday, he'll be in there, and I think that's a positive thing for the Steelers. But this is a defensive front that can get after you with multiple angles. You'll have your edge rushers, you'll have your Cam Haywards, you'll have your blitzing linebackers. There's plenty of things that float around there on that defense that allow them to get pressure from different sides, but they haven't fully done it. Now they're able to create turnovers. They've got back-to-back games with 3 turnovers. And I guess what I always look at, which defensive front has the better matchup with the opposing offensive front, because I look at the Steelers offensive front. They got a lot of young dudes. They got a lot of injuries. And that makes me wonder, do the Jets have the real edge in the matchup of defensive front versus offensive front?
I'll tell you what scares me from a Jets standpoint is this team over the last month has done a really lousy job picking up blitzes. Against Minnesota and Denver back-to-back weeks. Aaron Rodgers was hit more than 10 times both games. Both of those teams blitzed a lot. Now, Monday night against Buffalo, the offensive line held up much better outside of Tyron Smith. We'll get to him in a minute. But the secret of that game is Buffalo did not blitz a lot. Buffalo has the lowest blitz rate in the league. That was a game where they should have switched it up because Aaron Rodgers tore them up when they only rushed 4. Buffalo only blitzed 4 times in that game. Three of the 4 times they blitzed, they hit Rodgers. They barely touched him the rest of the night. So Buffalo should have changed up their game plan. The biggest issue with the Jets right now, I think, on the offensive line, though, is the tackles. They have 2 guys who very, very well respected in the NFL. Tyron Smith at left tackle, potential future Hall of Famer, of course, and Morgan Moses has been a really solid right tackle through his career. Both 33 years old, both showing signs of age right now. And I got to say, Morgan Moses versus TJ Watt, that's a matchup that terrifies me from the Jets. And the Steelers blitzing terrifies me because the Jets haven't shown any ability to pick it up.
I think that's something that the Jets need to be mindful of, but I also think it's something the Steelers need to be mindful of because they haven't been too much of a blitzing team so far this year. In fact, they've if you look at blitz rates, they have the third lowest blitz rate in the NFL right now at 18%. Do you think it would behoove them if they picked it up, if you think that it's that much of a challenge for the Jets to respond to that?
Yeah, and I think part of it's I'm sure the Steelers coaching staff's looking at what Buffalo did on Monday, and they noticed that every time the Bills blitzed, they got home. And look, even if you're a team that doesn't blitz a whole lot, this Jets offense is having a difficult time making big plays through the air, and part of it is Rodgers wants to get the ball out early. Rodgers at 40 years old, as I mentioned earlier. His body's having a tough time recovering from the hits. You can tell there were times against Minnesota or Denver. Once the hits started piling up, he was getting rid of it at the first sign of pressure. Even if the pocket had good integrity, if he even sniffed pressure, he was dumping the ball off as quick as he could. So you wanted to speed up his internal clock. I don't think Buffalo did a very good job of that. So even if you're a team that has a tendency, I think this Jets team has shown there's such a disparity between how they play when they're only rushed with 4 versus how they play when they're blitz that this is the week to change things up.
I think it could be interesting to see if those changes get made. I want to talk about more of these matchups between these 2 teams next here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, John Kutchko of Locked On Jets. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you the show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. This week, the Steelers are 1.5-point home dogs to the New York Jets this Sunday night, as the Jets are sitting on a money line of -124, the Steelers +106 with the over-under set at 38.5 points. You can also bet on big games like in the AFC North. The Bengals and the Browns are throwing down. Bengals 6.5-point favorites over Cleveland. Meanwhile, the Ravens take on the Buccaneers in what could be a game of the week type of candidate game with a 3.5-point road favorite advantage. Lots of odds ends and lines you can get there from FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Start your season with a big return on FanDuel. And if you get started today with your first $5 bet in FanDuel, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 of free bets today to new customers when you just bet $5 only on FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, John Kutchko of Locked On Jets. All right, John, let's talk about some more specific matchups in this game. And I can't help but wonder where you think Davante Adams will be used in this offense, if he'll be ready right away. I keep seeing, because I keep posting it too, the picture of the wrestler who's in the wheelchair with the fake leg, and then all of a sudden the blanket comes off and the leg is obviously fake, and that's in a cast. Are you expecting something like that for Davante Adams, where he's ready to go Sunday night, no questions asked?
By all accounts, it sounds like he's playing. Jeff Ulbrich, the Jets interim head coach, said he's going to be in the lineup. So, yeah, it's amazing the healing power. Just ironic how suddenly that hamstring injury is healthy now. I think he'll be ready to play now. He has missed time, so we can speculate about how severe the hamstring injury was. It's been a couple weeks since he's played, so I think there's a question of how many snaps he'll get. I think he'll be able to get into the lineup pretty quickly, because even though it's a new system. And even though Nathaniel Hackett's not the offensive coordinator anymore, he was demoted. This is a system that Nathaniel Hackett installed. They use the terminology Nathaniel Hackett uses, which is the system that Adams was part of in Green Bay. So I expect it. I don't think there are going to be any issues, getting him into the lineup. The question is how many snaps he'll go. He'll definitely play though, and I think he'll be Rodgers' look. I think when he's in there, he's going to be the guy Rodgers looks to.
The Steelers have been platooning against #1 wide receivers a lot this year, because they're not trying to have Joey Porter travel all the time. They love for him to match up with certain guys, but they have largely just been like, hey, you know what? We're going to come out in our zone defense. We're going to attack. We're going to be aggressive. And it's worked for the most part. But I do think the Steelers need to be mindful of when and where Davante Adams is inserted into this offense, because you haven't seen it with him in it and with Aaron Rodgers. And that's just a unique challenge the Steelers are going to have to face in this game.
Yeah, as I mentioned, one of the issues with the Jets offense is that Rodgers is looking to get the ball out quickly, and maybe that's in some ways that's not an issue. Rodgers can make pre-snap reads better than any quarterback in the league.
Right.
So if he sees spots on you want to get it out. It is a bit of an issue because they've struggled to throw the ball down the field and make big plays in the passing game. But if you're going to play this style, you need guys who are quick separators. And prior to this trade, Garrett Wilson was the only Jets receiver who you could really count on to win at the line of scrimmage and get quick separation. Not really Alan Lazard's game, not really Mike Williams' game. Davante Adams is well known for his ability to win off the line of scrimmage. And
yes,
Rodgers knows I don't think there's going to be much of an issue. I know they haven't played together in like 3 years, but I imagine it'll come back to them pretty quickly, where Rodgers will know exactly where he's going. Rodgers will trust him to win his matchups. So I do think Rodgers is going to look his way quite a bit in this game.
I think it would certainly behoove getting the superstar the ball in that situation. I want to ask you about this interior offensive line, or defensive front, mixing up my talking points here for the Jets, and how their run defense has worked this year. Because last week the Steelers rushing offense took off. Najee Harris averaged over 7 yards per carry, and they had some success there. But is this a defense that you don't lose any sleep over stopping the run, or do you think that's also a problem that you think could rear its ugly head?
It's a huge problem. If you watch Monday Night Football, the Jets allowed the Bills to go down the play on the first drive. 8 plays, 7 of them were runs. Bills averaged about 6 yards per run on that series. They ran for 149 yards in the game. It's been an issue since week 1 when the Jets got chewed up by Jordan Mason in San Francisco. There have been moments where they've stopped the run okay. The second half against Tennessee in week 2, they did well. They did well against the Patriots. Week 3, the first half of week 4 against Denver, they did pretty well. But they've been very inconsistent. I mean, I think the New England game is the only game where they played a full 60 minutes stopping the run. It's been an issue. The interior defensive line has not been good for the Jets. As I said, Quinton Williams has been a star. Who was a first team All-Pro 2 years ago,
Right.
Pro Bowler last year. I've been making excuses for him. I've been saying on Locked On Jets, you know what, guys, Quinton is going to figure it out. We're 6 weeks in, and it's not just that he's underperforming. I hate to say he's been objectively bad this year. I don't know what the reason is. Like, you watch him, he's getting pushed around. Javon Kinlaw, who they signed from San Francisco, he's actually been decent as a pass rusher, but I mean, he just gets annihilated in the run game. Leki Fatu, a guy they signed from Arizona, he was supposed to be the big run stopping nose tackle. He started the season on IR, was activated last week. He wasn't the solution. And we talked about Will McDonald earlier, 7 sacks. Part of the issue with the Jets right now is that McDonald, with Reddick holding out, McDonald's really the only defensive end you can count on to generate a pass rush. So he's got to play a lot, but he's playing at like 235, 240. He can't hold up against the run. And that's one of the things that it's one of the trade-offs is that in order to get that pass rushing productivity from McDonald, you're living with him not holding up against the run and him not being able to set the edge.
I think that's part of the challenge there for sure. I look at which team can establish their style of play sooner rather than later and get into the groove of things. I think the Steelers, they have a lot of changes they're still making. They're still figuring things out, but I think they're getting closer and closer to seeing what their final product will be when they figure it all out and have their offense ready to go. And this will be a big test. Like you said, yeah, they have their defense deficiencies on defense with the Jets, but at the same time, this is a talented defense that's gonna bring it. I think it's gonna be a really good matchup. I tend, John, I was asked by someone else this today. I haven't made my official prediction. I don't do that until Friday normally, but I tend to think this is going to be a very close contest in the low 20s of scoring, if that.
Last year, Robert Saleh, when he was the Jets head coach, made a statement that was mocked before the Jets Sunday night game in Las Vegas. He said, This game's a race to 20. And a lot of Jets fans were frustrated with Saleh because that kind of encapsulated his view that like offense was something to stay out of the way. And we could go into a lot of details on that, but this feels like a race to 20, this one to me.
I think it's certainly going to be a close, hardly fought game by two teams that have new but old quarterbacks, and I think there's a lot of similarities to how these teams have been constructed. We'll get into more on that as the week rolls along here. It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. John, thank you so much for joining me. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
You could go to gangreennation.com. That's where I do most of my writing.
Absolutely. Check out Gangrene Nation to get all of John Butchko's work covering the New York Jets as well as the Locked On Jets podcast. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. You can find me at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for my written work there. You can also find me here on the Locked On Podcast Network, just like John. I do Locked On Steelers. He does Locked On Jets. We're always Monday through Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes on your favorite team. We're back tomorrow, both breaking down our final looks at Steelers Jets here on the Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network.